Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Energy Storage Enhancements workshop. My name is Brenda Corona, here from the Stakeholder Affairs Group, and I will be here supported by my ISO team, especially Gabe Murtaugh, who is leading this initiative. Today, we do have a few meeting reminders for this collaborative workshop. It's in order to foster open dialogue, sharing ideas and perspectives, as well as the slides that we provide here today are from our fellow stakeholders who submitted them this last week. Also, for our fellow stakeholders who are presenting, we will be monitoring the attendees, so please make sure your name is fully, first name and last name is addressed on the name, and we will have you unmuted at the time that you will be speaking. If we do not see you, please raise your hand so that way we could call on you when your time is your turn. But before you begin speaking, please make sure you state your name and affiliation in order to allow audio participants to listen in. These meeting recordings will be posted publicly, and you will have a limited time to view them as well. Stakeholders are welcome to present their ideas, and feel free to chat with us if you do experience any technical issues at the moment that you're trying to use audio. For today's agenda, we do have a lot of these wonderful stakeholders providing their slides, so we will have a time constraint on many of these topics. So in order to go through all these slides, please feel free to listen to my cues in order for us to move on to the next speaker. If you do feel that you did not go over all your slides and content, we will do our very best at the end to let you finish your thoughts and address your concerns. But at this time, we as the ISO staff, we would like to listen to your wonderful details and expressions on anything that you're going to. And then at first, we're going to do introductions from all these stakeholders. And then next, we're going to do an ESR proposal section where we'll go over all those slides provided by these stakeholders. And then around 10:10, we will do a section from the reliability, AS, ED, and local. And then lastly, the co-located modeling for those slides as well. And then lastly, we will do the next steps for this. But before I start the meeting, I definitely want to invite Gabe and Ken Kasparian to hopefully capture a few items prior to this meeting, as well as the deadline implementation. So Gabe and Ken Kasparian, feel free to unmute your devices at this time.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Brenda. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody who's in attendance today. We've gotten a lot of feedback. Well, I would first say that we had a lot of feedback in our call on the revised straw proposal, and I think that a lot of that information really struck to the heart of the matter that, first and foremost, this policy has a lot of issues that we're trying to address and a lot of things that we're trying to take care of for storage resources. And the ISO is certainly appreciative of that. And during our last stakeholder meeting where we were discussing the revised straw proposal, we didn't have enough time to get through all of the comments from stakeholders. And I think in the past, we have deferred some of those comments just to written comments, but we thought in light of, the breadth of material that we're trying to cover in this policy, it would really be a good idea to sit down, kind of touch the brakes a little bit, and think about specifically each of the three components of the policy, the ESR proposal, the issues related to reliability, and particularly the co-located modeling, and allow stakeholders, some additional time and some opportunity to talk about these topics and give their thoughts on the direction that the ISO should head in relationship to where we are and where you guys think we need to be. With that said, I have been through all of the written comments. I think a lot of the comments focused on the co-located modeling, and, we understand that, there's a desire to have some movement on where the policy is there. We're internally thinking very hard about that. And frankly, we're going to be taking all of the comments that we received today very seriously as we go forward in this initiative. With that said, I am planning to be primarily in listening mode today, and I think that's how most of the members of the ISO are going to to behave in this meeting. I think we do really want to hear what's on the mind of our stakeholders, and we certainly appreciate you guys giving us the time and thinking hard about these issues as well and giving us good feedback. So I'm looking forward to the meeting. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, Gabe. Ken Kasparian, please unmute your device.
Good morning, Brenda. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Ken Kasparian. I'm part of the program office. And I just want to talk through just real quick on timing expectations. I know there's a lot of discussion that's come up here and there on that. And so I wanted to let you guys know where this is sitting on our overall roadmap and then what the process will be on continuing to evaluate this. So currently, this is sitting as a 2024 implementation on our policy roadmap that was just recently published in mid-March. So finishing up the policy this year and then for fall of 2024. However, what we have behind the scenes is we've got our enterprise priority list, which has all of our different initiatives, and we've got a placeholder on there for evaluating any expedited components, things like that, but that's going to fall into our internal prioritization process that'll be happening over the next several months coming into summer. And then it'll move right into our capital budget planning, and you'll start to see those lists of initiatives that we're going to be doing for 2023. And as we prioritize the energy storage with all of the other initiatives that are on the roadmap and the internal DISO, that's where you'll start to see any initiative we do for a potential expedited, and then that'll flow through as part of the capital budget planning and eventually into the normal MPPF and RUG meetings. So, any questions on that?
We do have a question from Susanschneider, so let's go ahead and take her question very quick.
Yeah, hi. Apologize if this is a stupid question, but you used a couple of acronyms, MPDF and RUG meeting. What can you just say what those are?
Yep, sorry about that. Yeah, our market planning and policy forum, MPPF, and then the release users group.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. So let's, okay, so make sure when you're done speaking, put your hand down, and then we're going to go ahead and go to our agenda and our introductions, and I appreciate Ken for going over those as well. So for today, we will do a quick introduction for our presenters. So please raise your hand icon for those presenters. Sean Hernandez, we will unmute you so that way you could go ahead and speak for a few minutes. And Catherine Culver, that's great. So presenters, please raise your hand at this time. If not, I'll send you a chat to remind you. But Sean Hernandez, Clean Power Alliance, your line is unmuted.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Am I only introducing right now or going into the materials we prepared?
Introducing.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I'm a project manager here at Clean Power Alliance for resource optimization. So working on some of our resource onboardings and bidding strategies. I'm really happy to talk to you all today about energy storage enhancements. We appreciate the work that CAISO is doing to think through these issues. And, you know, we've had some front row experience with our co-located resources sometimes being implied to grid charge. So very happy to share some of our experience and dive deeper into the recommendations we mentioned in our comments 1 and 2. Thank you so much.
Derek, your line's unmuted. Go ahead.
Derek, your line's been unmuted. You may go ahead. All right. I think Derek might be having some trouble with his muting yourself. Derek, be sure to unmute yourself on the WebEx screen. Click on the unmute icon at the bottom of your screen. And also remember to unmute your phone as well if you doubt it. All right. We are having some trouble with hearing Eric, and he's dropped off.
Okay, so yeah, Derek Hageman from the SEIA will be presenting today a few slides as well, so we will go back to him when he's turn. Raul, the line is unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Rahul Kalasthil. I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs at AES. I want to just thank the ISO for hosting this workshop and providing us with an opportunity to express our feedback on the revised straw proposal. AES is a Fortune 500 company, and we are a leading renewable energy solution provider. We have more than 4 gigawatt of operating portfolio that consists of solar, wind, and energy storage solution across 50 states. And we have more than 20 gigawatt of development portfolio. So today I will be presenting AES's position on the CAISO's energy storage enhancement. And I look forward to a healthy dialogue with all the other stakeholders and the CAISO staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek, your audio is back. Your line is unmuted.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry about that. Derek Hageman, I'm a senior associate with Gable Associates, and I'm presenting today on behalf of the Solar Energy Industries Association. Really appreciate the opportunity to present. Just at a super high level, we do support the idea of an energy storage resource model that is based on a resource state of charge, but we do think that there are a few areas of the proposal that could be fleshed out a little bit more, or could have a few additional details that would get us to a place that we'd be more comfortable with the proposal. We do think that some of the issues could potentially affect commercial viability for energy storage projects, which kind of, given the investment in energy storage at the moment and expected penetration moving forward, we think that's undesirable. So again, really appreciate the opportunity to present and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Susan, your line is unmuted.
Schneider, Phoenix. Oh, hi. Susan Schneider, Phoenix Consulting. I'm representing Large Scale Solar Association today. And I want to, first of all, thank the CAISO for including the issue of co-located resources and grid charging. We've been sort of looking for a home for that among the CAISO initiatives, and we're really delighted that the CAISO took that up and put it in the scope of this initiative. So most of our comments, given this is the Large Scale Solar Association, most of our comments are on the co-located resource issues and the issue of grid charging. We also have a couple of clarifications based on based on past statements of CAISO in its own documents and in meetings that we'd like to cover up or to clear up, mainly having to do with things like what I would otherwise call self-help options as far as limiting grid charging. We haven't really been able to get clarification on these points, and hope we will be able to do that through this initiative. So thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion today.
We have the presenter for PNM. We will come back to them. Kathleen, your line is unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. Brenda, can you hear me?
Yes, but you're far away, so if you can come closer. Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Great, thank you. I will just speak louder. This is Kathleen Colbert from Viscera. I'm the Director of CAISO Market Policy at Viscera, representing Viscera at several different venues across the West, including the CAISO. We appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective to the CAISO during this workshop today on its energy storage enhancements policy development effort. We plan to focus our feedback in a very targeted way on the energy storage resource model itself. And the remainder of our comments we submitted through the written comments. But in spirit of keeping this short and sweet and succinct, we will be focusing on the model feedback when we get time to do so. For some context, Viscera is one of our brands in California is Dynegy, and through our Dynegy brand, we have over 1,500 megawatts of capacity in California. Of that, we have currently online 400 megawatts of battery energy storage, about 1,600 megawatt hours worth. We have an additional 350 megawatts that we have successfully received a long-term agreement for that will be achieving commercial operations in 2023, just prior to what it sounds like this target release date is in 2024. But we also have a great deal of storage that is in development in the queue on top of that. We have an additional 1,460 megawatts, about 5,860 megawatt hours in addition that is currently in the CAISO's interconnection queue and being developed. In total, we look to have over 2,000 megawatts of capacity from battery energy storage on the CAISO controlled grid in the midterm time horizon. So this initiative is very important to Viscera, something that we appreciate the opportunity to engage in and help to try to focus the discussion in a way that will be advantageous both for the CAISO and for scheduling coordinators managing these assets. We look forward to sharing our perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Morlock, your line's unmuted.
Hi, this is Kevin Morlock from Utilicast representing PNM. So again, PNM is an EIM participant, and we'll have a large number of co-located resources coming online over the next few years. And so the co-located aspect here is very important for PNM and probably some other EIM entities that are being dictated to have both solar and storage combined together.
Thank you. Alpha, your line is unmuted.
I'm a principal analyst in the short-term electric supply department.
Alpha, we can't hear you. Can you get closer to your microphone?
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
A little bit, yeah. Much better.
I can try to get on the phone a little bit later for my presentation, but this is just the computer.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead.
Let me just see whether it.
We'll come back to you. One moment.
Okay.
Next we have Perry. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, everybody. I'm Perry Servio, consultant with GDS Associates, working on energy and capacity market design across the U.S. I'm here with Matt Smith, one of our energy storage experts who has been hands-on in energy storage for probably longer than any of us here have been. At GDS, just to give you some background, we help asset developers and procurement teams across the U.S. make decisions on right-sizing solar and storage installations, performing economic and financial analysis on those installations, and operating and maintaining those. We also help the procurement teams negotiate and acquire solar and energy storage resource installations that meet their goals. Overall comment just on the proposals, based on our understanding, we think it's a really great proposal. Does what CAISO set out to do last April, although we would like CAISO to pump the brakes on the changes to the MOC. And we'll talk about why that could probably use some more time than feasible in this initiative a little bit later on. Thank you.
Okay, Alva, let's try this again. Your line is unmuted.
Oh, great. Thanks. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I'm on the phone now, so hopefully this is better. Yeah, I'm Alvis Svoboda. I'm a principal analyst in the short-term electric supply department of Pacific Gas and Electric Company. We're just presenting briefly on a sort of along the lines of what Ken had discussed. We believe that a couple elements of this initiative are likely to be expedited, and we're more concerned about those. And so we wanted to make some comments on the exceptional dispatch part of the proposal and the ancillary service part of the proposal. We will certainly be making written comments on the modeling as we understand it better, and we really appreciate the way CAISO has been inclusive in this whole process of the energy storage enhancements and then taking in stakeholder feedback. Of course, we have the perspective of a load serving entity as well as a major portfolio of supply, as well as being operator of non-generating resources in the markets. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Next we have Brian. Your line, we don't see you on the raised hand, so your line is unmuted from your device. Brian Bossler.
Sorry, Brenda. What's Brian's last name? Is it Bossler?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Brian,
go ahead.
Are you there?
Good morning. This is Brian from Rev Renewables. We've operated utility scale energy storage projects in CAISO since 2018, have several hundred megawatts online today, all standalone. Just wanted to request additional detail from CAISO on the ESR model and make sure that all of these proposed changes are really focused on addressing the most important and observed problems of energy storage resources in the market today. I'm staying very focused on that.
Thank you so much. So that's our introduction at this time. We are going to go ahead and shift to our sections for energy storage resource model. For energy resource model reminder, we do have these slides prepared in order of the agenda. So we will have our first presenter, Raul, go first on his slides. Raul, you could go ahead and Raul, we have your line unmuted.
Thank you, Brenda. Just reconfirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so, just to carry over from my introduction, we wanted to present our idea and our assessment on the CAISO's revised straw proposal. So the first topic is the energy storage resource model. And we really appreciate that, CAISO has identified all the operational needs that are affecting the storage resource in its issue paper. Some of those needs are to provide the ability for storage to manage dynamic charge and discharge rates. And also CAISO has, identified that there will be need for long duration storage to manage transition times. This is for those long duration storage resources which cannot instantaneously switch from charging to discharging and vice versa. So, ES clearly understands that there is a need for improvement from the existing NGR model. And when we look at the CAISO's energy storage resource model at a very high level, this new proposal addresses these two issues and much more. So we really appreciate, CAISO taking this step and looking back at the current issues and looking forward, future issues and introducing this model. However, when we look at the details that are provided from the straw proposal, there is a very high level information of how the energy storage resource model would work. And we believe that it is lacking details of how the market will manage the dynamic charging, discharging rate, how the market will assess the ancillary service constraints, how the market will assess, let's say, minimum state of charge constraints. So there are more details that are required for participants to really understand how this model would work. And most of the participants are already familiar with the NGR model. So, it would be useful to provide more information to the stakeholders. So, they can decide whether they really want to switch from a known model of NGR or, there is a real value of using the ESR model. And the existing stakeholders, who have been using storage in production for a while have really gained a lot of experience with NGR and have already identified how they would like to manage risk. This is, more of an unknown with the ESR model, and that's what our recommendation is saying, that at this point, we really don't know how participants will be able to manage risk. We really don't know how dynamic charge and discharge rates will be supported in the ESR model and how the model would interpret that. So what we are recommending is, the CAISO, if they can provide details of the formulation similar to what the CAISO has done for the NGR model, that would be really helpful. And I think since Ken already mentioned that the implementation timeline for this is maybe fall of 2024, if I recollect that's correct, there is enough time for CAISO to provide that information. And that would be really helpful for participants to, compare whether they want to switch between NGR and ESR. And, that's the main takeaway for us. But we really appreciate that CAISO has taken this step to introduce a new model. So that's all I have for the energy storage resource model. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Susan who would like to ask you a question. Would you like to take that question, Raul?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Susanschneider, Phoenix Consulting. I just was wondering, you have some concerns about transition times for. Are you thinking about particular technologies with those kinds of concerns?
Yeah, I think all of those details are not very clear for us at this point, as in how the ESR would work. And at this point, we really haven't thought through of how the transition time would impact us. But if I were to look back and look at the, let's say, CAISO's MSG model, I think there is a sense of how this could work, but we really don't know how the physical model would look like in future.
I guess my question was more not so much about the model, but your concern about the transition times and whether it applies to, what particular technologies you had in mind that concern might apply to.
Some of the long duration storage that we are still discussing, but we don't have those details yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you both. We are going to go ahead and move on. Invite Kathleen Culver. Your line should be unmuted soon. You're ready. Go.
Great. Thank you. And I switched to my phone. Brenda, can you hear me better now?
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective. And I appreciate what Rahul just shared. At the risk of being slightly repetitive, I'm going to go through our content. So what Viscera is requesting the CAISO consider is that we believe that a positive and productive path forward would be to do two things. First, to focus on accurately reflecting the physical reality of storage in the market. And I'll talk about that in more detail. And then also to focus on answering stakeholder questions and to provide design details for any new model that's being presented. So first, let me spend a little time talking about what we mean when we say, let's focus on accurately reflecting the physical operations, how battery energy storage should be being reflected in any market participation model. First, the non-generator resource model should be enhanced as a first priority. Any physical modeling improvements need to be applied to any new model, and we understand that, but as a first priority, as we identify improvements to better modeling of the physical reality of storage, it should be implemented in the existing models as well. So the non-generator resource model and any new model should reflect these improvements. Our principle is that any active storage participation model should be enhanced to accurately reflect physical characteristics of storage as a function of state of charge. We believe the CAISO should be phasing the enhancements to more accurately reflect storage. We can talk a little bit more about that and happy to answer questions. But in our recommendation is that in the first phase, that both the existing NGR model and any new model should be reflecting the well-known issue that we've been discussing, of foldback, and how foldback is impacting the minimum operating levels or the maximum operating levels of battery energy storage, depending on where on the state of charge capability the storage is. So again, the first enhancement should be to improve the ability to reflect in the model the Pmin and Pmax levels as they change as a function of state of charge. We believe once that enhancement is active and we get more experience with how it's impacting market outcomes, that we then need to look at the operations of the battery energy storage and how it's being reflected in the market and identify whether adding the ramp rate as a function of state of charge functionality is still necessary to improve market outcomes. If we look at it and we identify that that ramp rate functionality, that additional complexity is now adding that additional modeling enhancement is still needed, then it's critical that it be done in a manner where there are two ramp rate curves as a function of the state of charge. The first curve should be charge ramp rate, where, and I'm referring to the binary variable, but I'm going to speak a little bit more generally. The first master file parameter should be a charge ramp rate as a function of state of charge. The second parameter should be a discharge ramp rate as a function of the discharge state. The ramp rate curves need to be identified and used in the market, and they can be done, and this can be done using the binary variable that identifies whether the storage is in a charge state or a discharge state, and use the appropriate curves based on what the state the storage is operating in. Alternatively, we believe it's possible that we could look at the operations, and once foldback issue has been better modeled in the market, we might identify that this additional complexity of a ramp rate curve is not needed. And in that case, no additional enhancements would be needed. That's the reason we're recommending to take a phased approach. We recognize stakeholders have raised cycle limitations or concerns with cycles throughout some of the comments in this process. Our recommendation is that storage with cycle limitations due to environmental restrictions or design considerations, which I want to note includes warranty specifications, should be able to register these use limitations, and if approved, be able to access the use limit reached outage cards and to seek an opportunity cost adder. I provided the links for folks who may not be as familiar with some of these discussions that were held on how storage use limitations could be registered and an opportunity cost, and the outage cards could be made available to those assets, which I believe was back in like 2017, but here's the link for the action plan that CAISO released. So I encourage folks to read about that in more detail. We believe that this is the right approach to respond to stakeholder concerns that storage assets do have some regulatory or environmental or design limitations. Next slide. The second piece of what we are recommending is that the CAISO should focus on answering stakeholder questions and providing design details for any new model. CAISO is using terms in its papers, in its slides that, and I'm kind of being tongue-in-cheek, but individually it all means something to us as a storage operator, but I want to provide the feedback that it is not intuitive from the documents that have been provided to date what the CAISO means by their descriptions as they're being used. It would be very helpful, first, for the CAISO to provide a glossary of terms that clearly defines the key terms. Essentially, when I say key terms, I mean the design elements that are in the energy storage resource proposal. The second recommendation we have is that the CAISO should hold a workshop that is dedicated to responding to written questions submitted by stakeholders. And in our minds, we're envisioning something similar to what was done for EDAM. There was an opportunity for stakeholders to submit questions in that initiative, and there was a meeting held to respond to those questions and to allow for some back and forth and clarification. Given the level of complexity in developing a new model, we believe that an opportunity to submit questions in advance and ask for a workshop or a meeting to have the CAISO respond to those directly would be incredibly beneficial. We understand that the energy storage resource model design is originating from a Columbia University model, and I provided the site below for some slides for more details. That does include slightly more detailed information than I think is currently being included in the CAISO's papers. That model, however, was developed to identify optimal bidding and storage assets from an academic perspective. It's solving a profit maximization problem. We are cautiously optimistic that the energy storage resource model that CAISO is proposing that would introduce a state of charge bidding option may have value as an optional participation model in addition to the non-generated resource model. But that optimism is cautious because we still are lacking a lot of detail. The energy storage resource model will only have value if it is designed not only with a theoretical or academic view in mind, but also with input from storage operators to ensure we can use the model to effectively manage our assets. We believe with additional workshops and iterations on this design and the ability to provide this feedback to the CAISO, we can improve on what has been put forward as a group. Viscera is recommending the CAISO take a step back and invite all scheduling coordinators who are managing storage to discuss with the CAISO the scheduling coordinators' needs and approach to managing these complex assets. We also recognize that CAISO wants to make the best use of the entire storage fleet, and we want to be engaging productively and collaboratively with the CAISO in that direction. The CAISO should develop design details for a model and illustrate how it addresses the scheduling coordinator and CAISO needs. I think Rahul referred to it as details of the formulation. I could not agree more. We believe that the design details should include formulation as well as examples that include not only the bidding and what the dispatch would result in, but also price formation. Any new model should better address the asset management needs of scheduling coordinators. And if not, we think the focus should remain on the non-generator resource model. But as I mentioned, Viscera is cautiously optimistic, and we are committed to engaging actively in this effort, and we just respectfully request the CAISO provide additional details, a glossary of terms, formulation, and some examples, including LMP impacts, and then give us an opportunity to submit questions and have those answered in a public stakeholder meeting. That concludes the feedback that Viscera wants to provide today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Kathleen, this is Gabe from the ISO. I just did want to state one thing. The paper from Columbia was actually developed independently, and it happened to be concurrent to the ISO developing their model. So these aren't, even though they look very similar, they're not actually related. The other thing I just wanted to clarify or ask to clarify was just maybe if you could provide a little bit more in terms of color as to why, you know, we should be changing the NGR model and not developing the ESR model with some of these features that you were asking for.
Thanks, Gabe, for the follow-up question. Do you mind if we go back to the previous slide since your question's more focused on that? So I do want to clarify, we're not recommending that you not enhance the state of charge model to include these, or I should say that you should not develop any new models with these physical modeling enhancements, but that any active model should contain it as well. I think that it's critical to be clear of whether or not the new model is replacing or if it is an optional tool or participation model in addition, but we don't see any reason that we should be harmed or disadvantaged for selecting either option. And so because of that, it's critical that the physical reality of the storage be able to be modeled in any active model.
Thanks for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Of course, happy to.
Thank you, Kathleen. Next, we have Perry, who will go ahead. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, Perry here. Hey, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hey, Perry Servio here, GDS. Do you guys have the PowerPoint version of this slide? or is this a PDF?
We posted it publicly, but at this time we are only presenting this slide.
Okay, yeah, so the graphic at the top here actually shows these curves moving around if we had the capability to click through the PowerPoint. But nonetheless, the main point, I wanted to get at here is that we went back and reread the issue paper from last April, and our view right now is that overall, CAISO's proposal has elements that resolve all of the issues that CAISO set out to resolve last April. And they identified those issues as accurate representation of marginal costs, ensuring that state of charge is able to be kept when and where it's needed. They talked about variable charging rates, which I think that the ESR model enables. And they also talked about exceptional dispatch, both tools that operators can use to better perform exceptional dispatch and the settlement of exceptional dispatch whenever energy storage resources need to hold their state of charge. So our comments on this slide are really based on our understanding of how the model would work once it's implemented, although we would like to see CAISO confirm this understanding through the next iteration of its proposal. We quite like it, and the reason why is, we showed last summer at the workshop that the current bidding interface leads to less profitable and less efficient operation of energy storage resources once you get to within the hour. And the root of this issue was that the operating costs changed throughout the hour based on the average state of charge incurred by the resource and the depth of discharge. And those things, if you leave it to CAISO to operate with a fixed PQ price quantity curve throughout the hour, CAISO could choose to very aggressively use the resource. And if they use the resource very aggressively, those costs could be 26 times higher than a less aggressive use case throughout the hour. So, if we're understanding this model correctly, we really see this model as fixing most of that problem, especially when you combine that with the ability to have the discharges taper off at the high and low end, and have the variable ramp rates based on what state of charge you are. It really, in our view, solves all of those problems. And because it solves these problems, this should bring the higher profitability. If you could see the graphic, what's going on here is you can imagine that the red shaded region throughout the hour will slide left and right as the resource is used. So if your state of charge is decreasing, you're seeing that the cost to discharge is increasing. And if you place that red shaded area right at the boundary of where the bid curve steps up, you have a multi-part bid curve where you're offering one quantity of the resource at a lower price than if you need to use the resource for more, you're offering it at a higher price. And you can imagine this PQ curve for the red shaded region sliding back and forth throughout the hour, meaning deeper you go into the discharge, the more expensive it gets. Similarly, on the charging side, you can imagine the blue shaded region moving left and right as you move throughout the hour, every 5-minute interval, and you can see a decreasing cost to charge as you get up to the upper band of the battery. This should really allow energy storage operators to peg their operations in the high range of the battery if it's more costly to do the deeper discharge, and it also better allows them to manage that average state of charge that they're incurring based on CAISO's operation of the battery based on these curves. One thing that we really wanted to highlight here, because it's important for the rest of the proposal, is that there's a really big benefit to this model on being able to hold a specific amount of energy, say at the bottom of the battery, at a set price. And And you would do so by ratcheting up that red curve on the lower part of the battery as you move to the right. And you could use this in a bunch of different ways. You can set that stored amount of energy to be exactly equal to your day-ahead schedule if you want. You could set it equal to an opportunity cost that's beyond the operation, beyond the real-time market optimization horizon if you want to. And that would effectively allow you to store and save energy for later in the day that's beyond the real-time optimization. So you get the two benefits there that we really wanted to highlight. It's representing that opportunity cost in any way that the battery operator would need to do that, whether it's a day-ahead schedule or an opportunity for a higher price discharge later. We can go to the next slide. Here, these are comments on the exceptional dispatch hold, the ED hold settlement proposal. You know, our view, it would be really unreasonable to approach this from an angle of, hey, what can you do to completely eliminate the need for an exceptional dispatch? So we understand operators are always going to need to engage in this at some level. And we actually think that, so understanding that, we should figure out a way to settle exceptional dispatch holds in a way that doesn't allow these opportunity costs to get away from the energy storage operator. So this is actually, if we understand it right, it seems like a very nice approach to determining the quantity using that, using the other, the ideal case, you know, what the ideal dispatch would have been and coming up with the quantity. We are, though, a little bit concerned about using the actual market price. The reason is that price is probably overstated because the exceptional dispatch is going to keep this resources bids out of the stack and all of the, you know, if operators really use this full tilt, you're going to have a lot of bids, especially in the future. You're going to have a lot of bids missing from the market supply stack. However, so yes, we are concerned about that price, but when you combine this proposal with the ESR model and being able to store energy at the bottom of the battery at a specific price, we really think that operators are probably going to find that they need to engage in less of this ED hold, because we think that the energy storage operators are going to want to be holding their energy down there for that high price opportunity later if they're anticipating that reliability need as well as they are when they're doing their price forecasting. So overall, with that understanding that likely this won't be used, won't need to be used a lot when in combination with the ESR model, we think it's a reasonable approach. Last, we have some comments on the minimum online commitment constraint. And at a high level, what we're really trying to say on this slide is that there are some pretty big price formation impacts here, and therefore we would need much more information about how this is going to work. Generally, you know, CAISO spent years explaining how modeling preventive corrective constraints as preventive constraints can be extremely costly, and that, at least my reading of the proposal right now, that's what it looks like CAISO is proposing to do. And it's actually why they originally came up with the contingency modeling enhancements proposal and built the prototype model for that proposal. The compounding factor here and why we're concerned about this is not only price formation, but we also think that the original, on my first slide, the ESR model, resolves a big part of what this is really going after. This is another way that operators are going to want to save charge for later, and that's CAISO operators. However, when you have the ESR model and energy storage, resources have the ability to save charge for later, we really see that they're going to be doing that for themselves, especially if there's $1,000 or $2,000 megawatt $1,000 or $2,000 per megawatt hour price opportunity later in the day, we should see that reflected in their bids, and therefore they should be wanting to save the charge in the right places on the system. That's another reason we think CAISO probably has more time to really figure this out and really think about this one. CAISO published, the other reason we're concerned here goes back to the CME model that CAISO built many years ago. And, CAISO published a technical review of that model back in, I believe it was 2017. And based on that review and the information in there, we're extremely concerned about the actual size of the problem that CAISO is trying to solve here, and therefore the ongoing added system cost that CAISO load will have to wear if in fact this is a proposal to model preventive corrective constraints as preventive constraints in the market optimization. So, just to give you a sense of that, CAISO used maybe, I believe, 12 very stressed system cases, and they could really only get CME to bind in one of those cases. And by doing this showed that in general, not specific to this proposal, but in general, MOCs are not needed day to day. And if this proposal is going to essentially start to move energy schedules and start to change energy prices day to day, it's going to add costs likely where costs are not needed to be added. So today, the MOC, we can bear it because it's really only impacting the resource commitment, has probably very little impact on clearing prices. However, when you start to say, hey, we're going to put the energy schedules and we're going to move the energy prices around in this model, as you would have to do what you want to do with the energy storage resources in these constraints, you now get to a much bigger pricing impact than the current MOCs would have.
Thank you, Perry. We're going to go ahead and move on. Go ahead.
No, in closing, I wanted to say we really like the ESR model. We think it solves everything CAISO set out to solve last April. We can stomach the ED holds. You might want to consider extending that to any resource that is asked to hold back from their full capability given that it will likely rarely be used. And then on the MOC, we're very concerned about the MOC, which was my last slide, and would like, maybe we just need more time. Maybe the CAISO can use the CME model to show how it would be needed with the batteries, and maybe we can move that into the price formation initiative. It's really a price formation issue there. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Brian Barstow.
Hey.
Hey, we can hear you.
Can you by chance bring me up to share my screen?
Unfortunately, we cannot. We already posted your slides at this time, so let's go ahead and share these slides at this time.
Okay. Probably end up speaking off the cuff then. Just wanted to thank CAISO again for taking the time to work on these issues. Just super high level, would echo a lot of what Kathleen and Viscera said, just that one, we want to emphasize that CAISO work on observed problems of resources today, and a big part of that will be adjusting the NGR model and keeping focus there, just because, right, that is supporting grid reliability and resources that are online today in the markets. As far as the ESR model goes, we want to see a lot more detail, as others have mentioned, on even kind of basic day-ahead and real-time dispatch examples, right? It's a really high bar to clear for us to want to switch, large operating resources to an entirely new model. And some specific issues, smaller, that we wanted to dig into, wanted to talk about dynamic capacity limits, some concerns there, and how they'd be actually just a great addition to even the NGR model. And then also getting into the need for ESR model or anything to allow resources to bid in megawatt tiers, just like the NGR model offers. So if we can go to the next slide. All right, so first, looks like we're starting off with dynamic capacity limits. So echoing what others have said, we just want all resource models to reflect the physical capabilities of the batteries. We think in general this is a good solution. I won't repeat everything that everybody else has said about the ramp rates. We think they're mostly not necessary, and if they're in place, they also need to reflect unique charging and discharging constraints. And just again, emphasizing that this is something that would be, even if nothing else in this proposal comes to fruition, this alone would be a great improvement to the NGR model. We can go to the next slide. Let's see. So don't want to put everybody to sleep reading a wall of text here, but the improvement that ESR offers, right, is that you can reflect your opportunity costs at different states of charge. The problem is, or the primary problem that we see with this specific feature is that as far as we can tell, this would only allow the battery to be charging or discharging at Pmin, so max power charging, or discharging at Pmax, or max power discharging. This has a lot of problems, right? You're not able to reflect the costs of operating at different states of power, the physical costs. And then also this, you know, if you just think through of how this would operate, this is going to completely eliminate your ability to manage risk and align wards over different market runs. So imagine, for example, you know, you have a partial day ahead award in an hour. If you're only able to charge and discharge at Pmin or Pmax, you completely lose the ability to match that award in real time across, you know, both the 15-minute market and the 5-minute market. So we can go to one of these later slides, I think, as an example. Yeah, so, you know, this chart that CAISO provided, right? It puts the bids in terms of state of charge. I think this almost makes it too complicated, right? When we're thinking about it, you can see in the kind of bottom Excel cells below, right? The x-axis, the left points in your bid curve should still be megawatts. You should still be able to bid in different megawatt tiers, and you'll just have a set of those for each different state of charge, right? So rather than just only being able to discharge at Pmax, charge at Pmin, you know, you still have that same ability to reflect your costs and align your awards across different market runs using megawatt bid tiers. Can we go to the next slide?
That's where we're stopping at this time. We are going to go over to reliability enhancement, and we'll come back to you for the other topic. Wonderful. So I just want to remind everyone, so we are having this agenda where if you have any questions of any of the topics, for example, we just went through ESR model, you could raise your hand at this time and you could ask it. At this time, I do see Carrie Bentley, and we will unmute your line to ask a question in regards to ESR model. Carrie Bentley, your line's unmuted.
Thanks. So this is Carrie Bentley from the Western Power Trading Forum. Actually, I don't have a question. We didn't put in slides today because we just have one simple ask. So WPTF really appreciates having this workshop. Definitely a step that was needed before the draft final proposal. But as helpful as it's been, we have a proposal that we'd like stakeholders and CAISO to consider. We completely agree with what AES, REV, and Vistra just presented. And so we propose splitting this initiative and have all the items move forward in the draft final proposal, except for the energy storage model. We believe that while the model is promising because of all the reasons that AES, Vistra, and REV just said, it's complex and it still needs to be vetted before moving forward. And given that this isn't even slated to be implemented until 2024, we would ask that let's prioritize the other items that we're about to talk about. Let's really make sure we get those right in the draft final proposal, and let's completely delay this very complicated new participation model for storage instead. So those are only comments on this workshop. So we ask that stakeholders let us know if you support this and let the CAISO know. We really believe that the energy storage model is not ready for going to FERC nor implementation at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. We can go ahead and unmute Derek to go over his slide for reliability enhancements. Derek, your line is unmuted.
Thanks. Yeah, this is Derek Hageman again. I'm with Gable Associates presenting today on behalf of CEO. So yeah, our primary concern on the reliability enhancements is with the discussion of ancillary services. You know, as a starting point, we think that the reliability issue discussed in the straw proposal was relatively vague. There was not a lot of information about the issues that CAISO is observing. And subsequently, the proposed solution was relatively vague as well. So we're having a hard time sort of evaluating the efficacy of the solution when the details are lacking. Most of our understanding of the proposed solution comes from the CAISO comments at the most recent ESE meeting. Our understanding is that CAISO is contemplating limiting the ability for energy storage resources to provide ancillary services to a certain degree. SIA is opposed to this idea. This causes concern for us. You know, at the very least, we see this as possibly going against FERC Order 841, which requires that energy storage resources have access to all markets and provide services in which they're technically capable of providing. So if this is an issue that CAISO sees as sort of a technical capability issue, we would definitely be interested in seeing more information on that. We think that it would certainly be helpful to, at the very least, spill some more ink on those issues and the proposed solution, and specifically include any data and analysis that has been done or that can be done to better describe the issues and demonstrate how the proposed solution could address those, and especially if CAISO is seeing this as a technical capability issue per our concerns regarding 841. And I did make a note that you know, these issues might be better served discussed in a separate stakeholder initiative, but just hearing the comments made today, you know, I would definitely echo sort of the feedback that you know, I think it would benefit everyone to take the time needed to sort of work through these and actually get the details right, so that the solutions you know, address those concerns. So maybe, you know, maybe a separate stakeholder initiative is not necessary, but you know, definitely slowing down this process given the fall 2024 implementation timeline, I think would be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Next, we have Raul. Your line is unmuted. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Hi, Brenda. Just can you reconfirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on to the next recommendation from AES regarding reliability enhancements. We support the CAISO operator's ability to hold the state of charge to meet the net load peak, and understand that, you know, managing grid reliability is ISO's #1 priority. We also support, you know, ISO using the exceptional dispatch, using the state of charge instead of using the go-to megawatt, you know, either fixed or a dispatch megawatt, because it makes sense to use SOC management for exceptional dispatch, as you know, market can really optimize the dispatch over the horizon if, you know, these SOC exceptional dispatch are issued way in advance. We don't have any specific comments on that aspect, but there is one concern, or there's something that's not answered, is, you know, I'm not sure if CAISO is introducing this new exceptional dispatch tool as a replacement for the minimum SOC constraint, which was introduced in summer of 2021 with the sunset of 2 years. And you know, we know that the minimum SOC constraint is a market-based solution for those days in which there was some rock in feasibility. I I don't want to hold off this discussion until then. This is more of a question for CAISO, and if we could get a response on that at some point during the conversation. So I'll put a pin on that. Then the next discussion is, about compensation for storage resource when there is an exceptional dispatch. And we completely agree in principle that, storage resource should be compensated for lost opportunity. This is simply based on the fact that the storage resource, financial models were essentially based on the fact that the resource is looking to make money every day based on differences in pricing, right? So if that ability is restricted because of ED, it makes sense to compensate the resource. The CAISO proposal to use, ex post process using the price that were already published is the right step forward. It's simpler to implement, does not require rerunning of markets to identify, what the lost opportunity cost was. That definitely makes sense. Implementing anything that requires rerun of market is really computationally intensive, and even though it might sound theoretically right, it may not be feasible to implement, and that would really push the implementation further. We would really need to have these things implemented much earlier. And if this is the first step in implementing those, opportunity cost calculation, we would support that. The only caveat to this is, we need to think about a little more what are the other possible things that could be considered in the current proposal. Maybe, we have to think impact of what would be the impact of day-ahead solution. What is the impact of 15-minute market outcome? What is the impact of ancillary service revenues? So those are the kind of details we need to think of, before this proposal goes from, draft to a final proposal. That would be our recommendation on compensation for EDs. And finally, the tools for the local area, just like, we agree that operators need to have the ability to manage the state of charge for grid reliability. There is definitely a need for the CAISO to rely on storage resources in local area because the resource mix is changing. And so our recommendation is CAISO currently uses the minimum online constraint MOCs to manage the local reliability, and there is a well-established process. CAISO publishes the information anytime MOCs are enforced, and that information is published on its external sites. We would request CAISO should do that, as we are thinking of implementing this. The other key aspect is same thing. If these new tools are going to limit the storage resources ability to sell in the market, and if there is a lost opportunity for the storage resource, there should be a compensation mechanism for these storage resources if they are going to be subject to any local reliability constraints. I think, as far as I read through the document, I don't see those details. We would like to see those details. If they were discussed at some point, we just request CAISO to present that information or just refer us to that documentation, and I think we can review that further. That's all I have for the reliability enhancements. Let me pause here.
Hey, Rahul, this is Gabe from the ISO again. Thanks for that presentation. I really appreciate it. Just to go back to your comment on the minimum stated charge, you are correct. The ISO and this specific policy is silent on the minimum stated charge, and I think that implies that we're really not planning on any changes there. So it is functionality that's currently in the market, and it can impact storage resources on the most extreme days. And that functionality will expire at the end of summer 2022. So it's valid this summer, but then after that, we will not be using it. I don't know that we're necessarily proposing the exceptional dispatch authority as a replacement to the minimum stated charge, but it is additional functionality that we as grid operators think we need to be able to reliably operate the grid.
So maybe I can ask you, Gabe, a couple of follow-up questions if this is the right time.
Yeah, sure.
So, the minimum SOC constraint, which was used for, those days where there is a potential that there could be impact to grid reliability. If that's going to expire in 2022 summer, is the plan for 2023 would be to use manual dispatch at that point? Because nothing is changing between 2022 and 2023. The resource mix, the grid, all is going to be pretty much similar, or more storage in 2023, more solar in 2023 compared to 2022. So, for a lack of a better word, kicking the can down the road with no discussion on that topic, it just feels that we may be looking at further discussion down the road. And if that happens, or if that gets extended for a few years, our recommendation would be, if we are talking of compensation, need to think about compensation if minimum SOC is, extended for one more year. And that's where I'll pause.
Yeah, I think the conversation has changed quite a bit. So the minimum stated charge was a tool that was put in place prior to summer 2021, and it was included as part of the summer readiness enhancements that we put in for that summer. The real fear at the time was that we didn't have much operational experience from storage resources. And, at the beginning of the summer of 2021, we really did see a large influx of new storage resources, and we knew that during that particular summer, there was going to be even higher reliability on storage resources being available and ready for discharge during the peak hours. And we didn't have, that operational data and history of storage resources actually being in the market and performing specifically energy shifting functions, where they were moving energy from the lowest priced hours of the day and available and ready for discharge during the highest priced hours of the day. I think looking back on actual operational performance, we've seen that storage resources are often available and they are often providing this energy shift function. And I think this is consistent with the economics that we see on the system. And the ISO has a lot higher confidence now and doesn't necessarily believe that we need a rule to blanket enforcement of aggregate stated charge levels on a resource by resource basis across the system. We believe that, and again, this is based on operational history, that we should organically get these levels of stated charge from storage resources participating in our market.
Gabe, this was extremely helpful, and I think does not have to be in this straw proposal, revised proposal, but at some point down the line, maybe after the summer in MPPF or something, if we can get that information, that would give a lot of confidence that exceptional dispatch would not be used at a higher frequency.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Thanks for the feedback, Rahul.
Thank you.
Next, we have Alva from PG&E. Alva, your line is unmuted. We can,
good morning.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Alva Svoboda from PG&E, as I said earlier. Gabe's comments just now were very helpful, actually, in that one of our concerns with the way this was presented was that minimum stated charge was an initiative that was essentially going to be discarded without a lot of rationale for why this software enhancement was just going to be abandoned. And originally, from the discussions of minimum stated charge, we had thought that it could be applied more generally in the same way that exceptional dispatch could be. One of our concerns with exceptional dispatch in general is that if there's a lot of it, results in a lot of loss of transparency in the market. And so the fact that Gabe has essentially promised that this will be a something that's even rarer than minimum state of charge constraint enforcement is definitely helpful in setting some of those fears at rest, because I think we have a lot of concerns with a lot of batteries being exceptionally dispatched at one time, as you might think. We did want to sort of just ask that clarification be given as to exactly what an exceptional dispatch to hold state of charge might mean. The impression from calling it holding a state of charge implies it's something different from the concept of the minimum state of charge or the target state of charge. And by the way, we do also want to understand the interactions between user set target states of charge and the exceptional dispatch to a state of charge. But our impression is this is not an end of hour state of charge constraint. It's a constraint that says you will not operate the battery essentially for some period, or you will operate only to hold a given state of charge, which would mean there would be no capability to provide ancillary services or to arbitrage within an hour. It would simply be, as has been, we've used the term before, a dumb rock that's only there for purposes of CAISO to then use, and in this case, to use at a later point in time. So we present here just a couple of alternatives as to how that might be formulated. We'd certainly probably be most comfortable with the idea that it's an end of hour state of charge or an end of hour minimum maximum state of charge, similar to what we've seen and tested over the last year in the enhancements that occurred under ESDR 4. But we'll hope for clarification on that when the proposal is brought forward. We're assuming also, by the way, in these comments that this is going to be bifurcated essentially from the rest of the ESE initiative, because it has to be put into place, as Rahul pointed out, by summer of 2023, essentially. And so we wanted to sort of focus on the CAISO's exit issues as being the highest likelihood of affecting us in the short term. The other thought we had was that if a coherent counterfactual compensation mechanism is developed, and I think Brian might have alluded to this as well, somebody did at any rate, that this idea could be applied more generally to exceptional, maybe it was Perry actually, but exceptional dispatches in general, or instructions to reduce dispatch, any situation in which there's an opportunity cost of not generating could probably be compensated in the same under the same calculation, and might need to be just for equal treatment of all resource types. So that's essentially, and of course the examples of those kinds of reductions in dispatch are out of market curtailments of solar and wind, as well as decommitments or state transitions that are downward rather than upward by CAISO. So that's those are essentially our comments on the exceptional dispatch part of this proposal. And if we can go to the next slide. We're referring to the ancillary service portion of this as regulation restrictions, because fundamentally that's what it was concerned with, not with spin as far as we could tell. And we agree here strongly with what I think Brian was saying, that the requirement of unencumbered energy bids reduces the potential regulation value potentially by half. If you think of it as either you have to offer regulation in one direction only and then encumber in the other direction, or if you offer half as much regulation upward and downward and then encumber the remaining charge and discharge capability. In either case, you've lost half of your regulation capacity, and that's a very major hit, given that the way Dave has described this so far is as an edge case. It's a case in which you are not at half-hour buffer prior to, in the 15-minute dispatch, and then you go over the half-hour buffer in the 5-minute dispatch. Now, we understand this is an actual thing that is happening and that it is harmful, But one possibility that we could see that would not actually reduce ancillary service capability or regulation capability would simply be to increase the size of the buffer, because it should be possible to come up with a buffer. We suggest an hour, but it might even be less than that. That would be sufficient to avoid that kind of infeasibility ever happening in the dispatch process. And there are other reasons it could happen anyway, but in terms of the actual dispatch, we would expect it not to happen because there would be enough time for CAISO to pull ancillary service regulation out prior to getting to that boundary that is really a hard boundary. We wanted also to point out that another issue with unencumbered energy bids is that they actually become energy bids, and they then can lead to unwanted dispatches, discharges, or charges when the only purpose of the bids was to provide CAISO with the assurance that they would not run out of regulation. And we find that also very problematic about this approach. Unlike what Brian was saying, I think we understand that this is another exigent need. So I think this is an area where we would really like to see a workable proposal developed as quickly as possible. But we are concerned about the direction that it's taking right now. So very much enjoyed all the rest of what we've heard so far, and we'll intend on commenting and interacting further on all of what we've heard so far. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alva. We do have a question from Raul, and anyone who likes to raise your hand at this time to ask questions for this portion of the topic, feel free. Raul, your line's unmuted. We can hear you.
So I just have a question, and maybe it's all for Alva and for CAISO. So I think the way I understood the proposal was if there is a regulation award and the CAISO sees a need to charge the resource it's requesting, the rules would be basically you would have to submit a energy bid. The immediate thought is if the resource is going to run out of charge and CAISO needs a bid to charge, since the constraint is to meet the regulation award, the resource need to charge, will the soft market application charge the resource irrespective of the charging bid, because it's not considering economics, it's considering some other constraint? Would that lead to some suboptimal solutions, or the market would still optimize the resource charging decision, and at worst case it's suboptimal? That is another question that I had in that specific topic, and I don't know if Alva, you have a sense of that, or maybe this is for Gabe, but I'll pause here.
Can I make one comment, Gabe? Because I think Gabe will answer the question better, but I did want to say that one idea we had was that CAISO could have other means of accessing that energy. I think, Rahul, you're not correct, however, in the way you characterized the requirement, which is effectively you have to have the bid there in order to get the award. You don't put the bid in after the award, because what if you get an award of full regulation in both directions? So we are concerned about this as a way that it constrains the awards. It's not just a requirement after you get an award. But I'll leave it to Gabe to address the rest.
Yeah, I think these are really good questions from both Rahul and Alva, so I appreciate that. And it was certainly, these were certainly echoed in the written comments that we got in the revised straw proposal as well. But I think the idea is that, well, at least the concern from the ISO perspective is that when storage resources do get awards for as much regulation as they can get, so they get a regulation up award and a regulation down award, then at some point during that award time frame, the resources are actually, and we're observing this in actual operations, running out of state of charge, and they can't actually provide the regulation award at the time that they're required to. And the thought with the bids was that we wouldn't do anything uneconomic, but at the very least, if we had the bids and the bids were economic, then there would be some ability to charge the resource, as opposed to if the resource did get, fully dispatched for their entire capacity for regulation, then they're in a situation where the ISO doesn't have any ability to charge the resources because all the capacity is spoken for.
So, Gabe, Alva, maybe if I can just provide one more response, if there is still time.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, response to Alva, I think, Alva, the AS awards you receive from day ahead, and then the bidding opportunity is real time. So they are asynchronous, that you could get an award but not have a bid, because your day ahead and AS awards would go self-schedule in real time, whereas in real time you still have to reoffer. So that would be my response to Alva. To Gabe, I think this is something that may not happen frequently, but just to think of in terms of compensation. If it happens very frequently, that the resource gets, is getting charged at a price that they does not support their offer, we may need to think about compensation in future. So, I from a reliability perspective, I do agree with you that this is a need, because having a regulation award not backed by SOC would not be good for the grid. The other aspect is, if this happens more frequently, then maybe we go back to thinking how we could address this in day ahead, because addressing suboptimal solutions in real time are always challenging. So maybe the root cause is, if in day ahead we have to account for SOC consumption for AS award, we may have to revisit that. I don't think we need to revisit it right now, but that's something to think about for a longer term.
Just to comment on your, Rahul, you would still, under this proposal, if you suppose you were a 4-hour battery and you essentially you weren't really interested in the energy in arbitrage. So you simply had yourself a 50% state of charge with 2 hours worth of upward and downward capability, and you were to bid regulation upward and downward, you would still be limited in your ability to bid full regulation upward and downward by this proposal, and that seems doesn't seem. It seems like it would be quite a haircut. Let's just put it that way, in terms of a battery that it was basically trying to provide regulation in the market.
I'm not sure if I understood the same way. Maybe, Gabe, if you can clarify that, is that going to result in a 50% haircut? Because I thought the only obligation was to offer charging bid in the real time if you had a regulation up award.
Yeah, I think the idea would be that, today, if you've got a plus or minus 100 megawatt storage resource, can qualify for, if it gets an energy award for negative 100 megawatts, it could qualify for as much as 200 megawatts of reg up. If it gets an energy award of plus 100 megawatts, it could potentially get an award for 200 megawatts of reg down. The idea here with this proposal would say, anytime the storage resource is getting an award, so it could be the same plus or minus 100 megawatt resource, and it can get an award for, let's just say, 100 megawatts of reg up. At that point, we would require that there be bids in the downward direction, so from 0 megawatts down to negative 100 megawatts. By the same token, you could, clear the resource for 50 megawatts of reg up and 50 megawatts of reg down, but then you'd have to have bids, from 0 megawatts to 50 megawatts of energy in the upward direction, and from 0 megawatts to negative 50 for energy in the downward direction. So I think there would be a reduction in the amount of regulation that storage resources could potentially provide, but that regulation would be backed up by bids from energy.
But I think Gabe, you missed the last example, right? Where what if it's 100 megawatt, plus or minus resource, and you got a discharge, let's say you got a charge of 100, and you could still provide 200 megawatt of reg up. Is that going to go away?
Yeah, I think that wouldn't be feasible. You could only get an award for 100 megawatts of regulation.
Just because the direction. So that's a fundamental change from. That's a significant change.
And currently there isn't. There's no way for the CAISO to give you full awards of upward and downward regulation in the example that Gabe provided, because when you have full awards, you can't provide an unencumbered energy bid. So by definition, they have in considering their procurement, they have to leave capacity unencumbered in order to make this possible in the day-ahead market.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Kathleen on queue. We can let her, her line's unmuted. Kathleen Colbert.
Great, no, thank you. I just, my understanding is that now is an all right time to ask a couple clarifying questions on this category of reliability. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had a couple things I wanted to ask and tee up for further discussion or for additional information down the road. But first, since Alva just presented, my question for either, Alva, if you have any more context you want to provide, that if you want to share, but this is largely a CAISO question that we've been posing related to the ancillary service proposal, is we've been asking for additional information on the size of this issue. You used the language edge case, and that is how I had understood it as well. But I was wondering if Alva and/or the CAISO has any additional information, or if the CAISO would commit to provide additional analysis on the size of the issue that the AS proposal is intended to address.
I don't have those numbers right now.
Understood.
I agree with you, Kathleen. I agree with you
okay.
that we need to understand the frequency of this in order to be able to sympathize sufficiently with CAISO's need.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, and thank you, Alva, because I'll take back some of your suggestions and your alternatives, and we'll do some exploring on our side on the idea of maybe looking at the AS SOC constraint more so than the paired bids. But I do think additional analysis would be really critical for us to be able to do that determination and kind of come to a position. So just wanted to make that plug again. That would be great in the next iteration to have some of that information so that we can think about the options. My second question has to do with actually Rahul's proposal, so AES. On the slide, the comments about tools for the local area versus ED, but kind of focusing on the tools for the local area. This is another category of the proposal that we think is lacking a lot of detail. And I've read through it again, and I did not see the additional detail that we had asked for off of the straw proposal. So we'd like to ask, and Gabe, if you'd like to provide some more details now, but some of our questions, like very pointedly, is I know Rahul's discussing minimum online constraint functionality. I get you can use a nomogram to do some of these things, but that's less efficient than using functionality that would model the N-1-1 conditions. That was worked out through contingency modeling enhancements. While I understand CME is not something that is being implemented, it does seem that if it's the functionality and it's been designed, that it could be done in a very targeted way to address this specific issue. So I see CME as an option. Or the third is using out-of-market manual dispatches. Can you provide some more context on these options and maybe commit to just discussing them in the next iteration and providing more details?
Yeah, I think we did expand the language on this section of the paper in the revised straw proposal compared to the straw proposal. And I think we are anticipating actually including the requirements in the market runs. So, local area requirements would be included in, both day ahead and potentially real-time market runs, which would impact prices. And this wouldn't be something that would be done through out-of-market actions.
So Gabe, I did review the revised draw proposal, and perhaps my bar is different than yours for a detailed kind of response, but I would say that I'm asking for kind of more detail on what if it is an in-market constraint, how it be formulated. And the paper does not say if it would be done the same as the minimum online constraint, or if it would be another constraint, more like a contingency modeling enhancement constraint. And so if you could provide that additional detail, I think that is the level we need to be able to evaluate the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, we have Carrie Bentley. Your line's unmuted.
It's not. Oh, there we go. Am I unmuted? Oh, yeah, there we go. Hi, this is Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum. Since Kathleen was asking for things in the next proposal, we still haven't gotten a response to our last written comments on the ancillary services issue. I liked how PG&E framed it a lot. We also had an alternative proposal that I didn't go over again here, but I'm wondering if you could respond more generally. Is the plan to still go to a draft final proposal? What is the CAISO's plan to respond to both written comments and the comments provided on this workshop?
I think that's part of what we're going to assess after this workshop. Keone might have some additional details that he wants to provide on responding to stakeholder questions.
Okay, thanks, Gabe. I think, at least from my perspective, it seems like there's still a lot of work for the CAISO to do. I'll note that we brought up some very large discriminatory issues with the AS proposal, as well as an alternative way to maybe get around those discriminatory issues. So it would be helpful to at least know that the CAISO has considered our comments. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for that. This is Keone. Sorry, I was on double mute. We're going to be addressing the comments through the paper. That's how we'll be responding to them.
Specifically, like in a call-out spreadsheet, or do you just mean through the content of the paper?
Just through the content of the paper.
All right. So I'll just note, because I want to give you guys a heads up, that we certainly plan, if our comments are not addressed, to send a letter to the board and work with the board in advance of this one. I think there's been a disturbing trend of forcing things through a little too quickly. And there really is no need on this one, given how far out implementation is. So we would just request the CAISO very strongly to consider doing a breakout spreadsheet and respond to comments individually. We have about 10,000 megawatts of storage coming on in the next 10 years, and this is a huge reliability and market issue. And clearly, as you could tell from this workshop, is a priority for many, many companies. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we do definitely are considering the comments that we've received. And one of the reasons why we're having this workshop is to hear you guys more clearly on what your concerns are. And we'll be noting these. Thanks a lot.
We have 10 more minutes prior to moving to co-located enhancements. So for those who are raised your hands, please keep your comments really brief so we can stay on schedule. So Chris, we have you next on queue. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Chris Devin with Customized Energy Solutions. So I just want to back up some of the that WPTF made about the process. So I think we would certainly support taking more time on this and providing additional detail. The other kind of substantive thing I wanted to ask about was regarding these exceptional dispatch proposals and some of the other impacts on data charge. I think PG&E and AES have pointed out some, important concepts here. And I think, we would also support CAISO providing some more detail on the particular issues like what PG&E was pointing out with the, how is this going to impact the ability for resources to hold state of charge throughout the hour? Or is there going to be an ability just to have an end of hour state of charge point, and those sort of things, I think also impact potentially the point about the compensation for the way the CAISO is proposed to calculate the ED compensation, where there's that counterfactual approach, and perhaps should think about what that decision may need to drive the length of time for that calculation or the formulation of that counterfactual calculation as well, because I think there were some comments that we saw in the stakeholders' written comments that had some additional input about that, need to look over perhaps a longer time frame. So it would be good to hear the CAISO's response on that. And then separate just recommendation I'd like to make is that the CAISO should try to consider developing some reporting on the state of charge for resources. I think the last MPPF meeting had some good input on, the state of charge of resources and kind of the behavior after the fact. It may be helpful if CAISO could include like a system level state of charge megawatt hour chart on the CAISO website, similar to how it does for the battery trend chart. So just something to possibly think about to provide more visibility. And I think along with that kind of data reporting, it would be helpful to see how often the CAISO actually utilizes these ED tools, and some additional reporting on that. I certainly would support the other ideas about people requesting information to support the proposal, but also after the fact, there should be some additional reporting on these things and transparency on how much they're used, the magnitude of megawatt and megawatt hour impacts, and those sort of things should all be reported. So I'll end my comments with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Sergio to go over a quick comment. Your line's unmuted, Sergio.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. This is Sergio Dueñas with the California Energy Storage Alliance. So I just wanted to sort of do a quick comment recap of the concerns that I think we've heard from our membership and we've heard from the presenters here today, and then just add a couple of recommendations. So first, I'd say it would seem that some of the common themes that we've found in comments before today and talking through our membership is that there seems to be a bit of a consensus among stakeholders that while the thinking of the CAISO on the ESR model is definitely valuable, it might be premature at this time to focus our efforts on a new participation pathway. Especially because there are concerns and recommendations that can be applied to the NGR model today. Some of them brought by parties in their comments, but others actually that can be taken from the ESR formulation and be sort of readily applied to the NGR model. And we have been asking for this and commenting this since the issue paper was first posted, and we've noted that other parties have done so, and today clearly this has been repeated. So this sort of connects with my second point, that is we could have been a bit more agile perhaps in going through these questions if we had, as it was mentioned before, a clear section in the papers where we can see why the ISO, how it can respond, staff, to our comments. It continues to be sort of unclear to me why there is a big hesitancy in touching, even incrementally, improving around the edges, the NGR model. And this could be captured if we had, a direct response in the papers. Parties have asked to include these reforms or these tweaks to the NGR model. CAISO staff disagrees because X, Y, Z. And that would allow us to keep the conversation moving forward in comments, give you the data you need, give you the information you need. So I think there is some consensus in the concerns we have. Maybe we need to discuss more about NGR. Maybe we need to move the ESR conversation a bit later on. We need definitely more clarity on what exceptional dispatch of SOC means and how it would operate. But all of this can be better, implemented, effectuated, and discussed. We have a more clear response to and interaction with stakeholders. And I just wanted to echo what was said prior about pushing some initiatives. I think this is what happened with the minimum state of charge requirement. And there was a clear policy argument of fear of uncertainty, of course, given what had just happened in August 2020 and the fact that we were experiencing clear, drought conditions. But here, it's a bit different. We have a bit more time to finesse models, and we should use that at the best extent, considering the feedback and, engaging very directly. So I appreciate the CAISO staff for having this meeting, and I echo what other people have said of what's the clarity we need and how we can move forward with a more clear response of each of the comments that have been filed. Yeah.
Thank you, Sergio. Now we're going to go ahead and start.
This is Keone, real quick. Thank you for that input, and thanks for everybody chiming in on this. We're going to take it back internally and look at how we could best address your questions and comments. We may even have another workshop if that's going to work out where we could address all your comments, but we'll take it back internally and see how best to address this. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you, Keone. So we will start on our next topic. Since we are kind of running close to our time, we want to start with Sean Hernandez from Clean Power Alliance. Your line should be unmuted.
Hello, thank you so much. Yes, so Clean Power Alliance is keenly interested on these co-located enhancements, and we like what we're reading in the proposals for the most part. We are aware that facilities install grid charge protection devices as part of their construction. Now, these are digital electrical detectors as well as mechanical processes that when a grid charge on a co-located facility is detected, a breaker will open, disconnecting the storage facility from the wholesale grid and initiating, therefore, a forced outage. So these, we're only counterparties to a contract with scheduling rights, so we don't necessarily decide how the facility is constructed and what kinds of devices are built along with it. And so there have been a few instances, both in testing and during curtailment periods, where grid charging has been attempted on our facilities, and an outage lasting a handful of hours will follow that due to this breaker needing to be reclosed. So that's what the experience has been like for us. And some of our comments are around basically suggesting optimized curtailment order strategies. And we also wanted to comment on the 5-year period. So first, the second straw proposal does recommend keeping the storage deviation functionality, the co-locate enhancement, for the period of 5 years. And we do appreciate that, but want to point out that contracts do prohibit grid charging for the entire duration of the long term, maybe call it a 15-year. So although the ITC benefits are captured within that 5-year period, some of our contracting counterparties have decided to ban grid charging for the whole time. We understand that CAISO thinks that they need access to all of the maximum physical attributes of these resources, but there are also the economic attributes of these resources. And these resources have come to us at a particular price with a particular set of capabilities. So this proceeding really begs the question, should the grid operator have the power to interfere with these agreements? Or should LSEs and merchants have the economic freedom to secure the cheapest possible financing? We can, within this 5-year period, we can conceivably go back and renegotiate these agreements, but that will come with price increases, most likely. Any renegotiation always opens up that possibility. So it's a question, I think, of whether that's something we should really be risking to stick the customers with, these more expensive contracts. And a finer point on this is that the property tax benefits do not expire after 5 years. So I think we need to stay at the drawing board for the consideration of this 5-year period, whether that's going to suffice or not. Okay, so second, regarding renewable curtailment. Renewable curtailment should not cause grid charging. And with the second straw proposal, we do have workarounds that storage will be allowed to deviate so that there will not be grid charging if there's a curtailment. But what would be a lot better is if CAISO did not order curtailment on co-located facilities that caused grid charging. CAISO, through the GRDTs, knows which resources are co-located. CAISO knows the schedules, and it seems conceivable that a lesser amount of curtailment could be ordered so that the storage charging could still take place and energy would not be exported to the grid. In other words, co-located facilities could be minimally curtailed so that charging can proceed and the co-located facility as a whole can contribute as much as possible to clearing system oversupply. And I say as much as possible because since grid charging is not allowed, this battery at a co-located facility is not able to clear system oversupplies by charging. And it seems right now, in the status quo and also under the revised proposal, we would be basically facing that expectation by ISO that these co-located batteries can help clear grid charges. But in reality, if you order solar to curtail to zero, you might be expecting storage to charge to clear some oversupply, but really it's going to cause a forced outage, which is going to impact the grid for a period of a few more hours. And so with that, let's go to my second slide here. In our comments, both 1 and 2 of this proceeding, we outlined this set of equations, 1, 2, 3, which pretty simply suggests how much co-located facilities would ideally be curtailed. In equation 1, we have that the amount of exports to the grid is equal to the scheduled solar production minus the charging, minus the curtailment. And so if we want exports to the grid to be zero, while production and charging are non-zero, then we can have optimal curtailment, or curtailment star, defined as scheduled production minus scheduled charging. And so if you just plug that curtailment star into equation 1, you can get equation 3. It will be zero by definition. And so our request would be that in addition to allowing storage to deviate, solar or renewable curtailments basically be optimized to allow the charging to continue and exports to the grid to not continue. This would especially impact curtailments that are self-schedule cuts and exceptional dispatches. I'm supposing that resources economically bidding do have a good amount of control over the level of curtailment. However, the minimum bid of 150 minus 150 being greater than the minimum price in the market leads to some additional opportunity there. But that seems for the most part to be under controlled. So in this comment, I think we're mostly requesting that self-schedule cuts and exceptional dispatches consider the storage charging so that curtailment not be greater than is really needed. And that's it from me. Happy to hear your questions.
We have Derek Hageman going next.
Thanks, Derek Hageman with. Thanks, Derek Hageman with Gable Associates, presenting on behalf of SIA. First, just wanted to voice our appreciation of CAISO, being responsive to stakeholder comments and feedback regarding, mechanisms to prevent grid charging. Our concern really is around the proposed implementation of these preventative mechanisms and the eligibility criteria. Specifically, it's a little unclear to SIA, and we would definitely be interested in learning more about CAISO's justification for things like the requirement that a resource be in service and active in CAISO markets at the time of the policy's effective date in order to be eligible for the preventative mechanisms, as well as the 5-year sunset period and some of the contractual obligations that were mentioned in the straw proposal. On that last point, it's pretty unclear what CAISO is envisioning with these contractual requirements. We would certainly appreciate some clarity in terms of what CAISO is envisioning in terms of those contractual requirements, specifically as it relates to ITC, which the ITC implications aren't always or aren't ever really reflected in a contract with an off-taker or a PPA. So we definitely have some concerns that requiring a contractual demonstration of the need to prevent grid charging could preclude certain resources from enjoying the benefit of the preventative mechanism. I think there are likely alternatives. We have a pretty simple solution that I think could be worked relatively easily that would essentially, at least for the ITC component, just tie eligibility and implementation to the ITC provision. This would allow for any timing concerns to be addressed simply by a demonstration from the resource that that they are utilizing the ITC. We think that this would address uncertainty that could be unduly created with some of the eligibility and timing requirements included in the straw proposal. I think it would provide some transparency for both developers and CAISO, in terms of the eligibility rules and the timelines, and that would prevent really the need for an effective date for the policy and any kind of sunset, so long as the resource is utilizing the ITC and demonstrating the need for the preventative mechanism. So those are our comments on the co-located enhancements. Thanks.
Thank you, Derek. Raul, we have you next. The line is unmuted.
Hi, can you confirm you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Sean and Derek, for kicking off this conversation. So I would like not to repeat those specific points, especially Sean has clearly stated the need for this constraint or the need for a constraint in the market to manage the ITC. So, let me just briefly state that. Yeah, AES would like to echo that ITCs are extremely important. They're essentially fueling the growth of storage in CAISO, and they're providing the right incentives so that, more and more storage can come online as soon as possible. What I would like to highlight here is CAISO may already have this feature in the market that's called the aggregate capability constraint, which could address the need to manage the ITC in the market model. So this is a question for CAISO, and at some point, I'll just put a pin on that question if CAISO would like to address that. Yes, whether that is true, either in this forum or in written response, we would like to know that. So if that functionality exists, then we would really urge CAISO to implement that as soon as possible. And the main reason for requesting this feature, because there are these financial models baked into the storage development process where participants are already relying on the ITC revenues. So if there is a lack of market functionality to reflect their choice, then scheduling coordinators or developers may be making a decision on how to offer the resource. And if they start making those decisions, and anytime we know that manual decisions are always suboptimal, rather than providing all the information to the grid and let grid make the most optimal decision. So essentially, we are at that situation where a lot of storage resources are coming online, and if those resources see that they are not meeting their ITC expectation, they may be making some decision that's really not good for the grid. So those are the two key points we wanted to make in this presentation. And finally, if CAISO believes that yes, that functionality exists, we would request CAISO to consider implementing this if as soon as possible, maybe if it's possible in 2022. Please think about that. And I think Ken in the morning mentioned that once we go through this proposal, we'll figure out which can be expedited. So that's where I would urge CAISO to consider expediting this specific feature for implementation. And finally, I think it is just reasonable for CAISO to consider that ITC restriction, those features will be available in the market only if the storage developers show that it's tied to either a federal policy or a state policy. So tying that implementation to an ITC or state policy make perfect sense. But I would urge to use that in tariff or BPM rather than saying that there is a sunset clause for 5 years, because that would tie CAISO's hands and also the storage developers' hands, and would essentially mean that we will have that discussion over and over again. So our suggestion is we just tie any market features to storage developers showing a justification for ITC, federal policy or state policy, essentially whatever is driving the financial incentive for those resources to come online. So that's all I have on this slide, and then I'll hand it off to the next person.
Thank you. Next we have Kevin Morlock. Kevin, your line should be unmuted for PNM.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Kevin Morlock with PNM. Again, appreciate everybody's earlier comments. I think I just kind of want to continue to echo what I've heard. PNM being an EIM entity, not directly inside the full CAISO market, is really interested to see these co-located enhancements so that we can bid in the charging side of these resources and still be respected the constraints of the ITC. The big challenge, as I think everybody else has mentioned, is if you put a timeline of when these would be effective based off the implementation date, there's a lot of lost opportunity. And PNM as a utility is not necessarily directly in their own control because of state utility commissions having a say in what new resources are being brought online, and to the point of others have made about the economics. Without the ITC, some of these projects might not become economic, and then really losing out on that capability. I also want to echo Rahul's earlier comment that I'd like to better understand how to leverage the aggregated capability constraint, because I believe that from what I've heard from others at CAISO, that you could leverage some of that in a bi-directional fashion to limit charging from the grid. So, maybe we can leverage that as well. Again, I'm not going to go into more details here, but just because I think it's been echoed already.
Thank you, Kevin. Now we're going to Susan. Your line should be unmuted. One second. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I had my hand up before. I did want to join the chorus of complaints about the process here. I understand what you're saying about, before I even get into mine, I understand what you're saying about responding in the paper, but if you don't include an idea that somebody has or don't respond at all, you first of all don't give anybody security that you've actually looked at it. And, and we know you say you're doing it, and we know you make a good effort, and everybody's working very hard, but you're also human beings and have a lot to deal with. And so we don't know that you've looked at it unless you say that you did. And you are missing, I think, an opportunity to give stakeholders greater understanding when you don't include their ideas about why you didn't, because maybe you would get more agreement and less repetition of the same ideas over again if you explained why they weren't acceptable or in some fashion. So, or maybe you get better ideas in return. So I just wanted to echo that before I get into it. So I also want to say here that this is, these are very focused slides here, but in general, nobody wants to restrict grid charging. It's not like it's a great thing to do. But at the state and federal, or the federal policy level, the decision has been made to do this. And so to have to continually fight to have this accommodation, or to have the CAISO offer something in the straw proposal, and then in the revised straw proposal, maybe somebody got nervous, I don't know, back off on it so that almost nobody would qualify or anybody who would really benefit from it. That's not terribly helpful. So that's sort of the larger comments, but I'm going to get down into the specifics now. The mechanics, we are generally supportive of the mechanics here, but we do think that we need some more information on how this would work. For example, the storage has a must-offer obligation in the day-ahead market, but the solar or the renewables do not have a must-offer obligation until real time. So if the storage had schedules in the day-ahead market, and then it turned out that a facility using this option where the renewables had lower output schedules during hours when the storage would be charging, would there be an adjustment to the day-ahead schedule for the renewable schedule in real time? So the whole interaction of the day-ahead real-time must-offer obligations are unclear here, and so we'd like to understand how that works. It's not clear how, if the storage is dispatched down pursuant to economic bids. There was a very confusing discussion in the last version of the proposal about this, calling things, non-economic curtailment when it really was economic. We don't really understand how that works, and wish the CAISO would spend a little more time just explaining this, or what you actually meant by this. Also, it talks about solar or wind being in real-time production below the forecast and not below the schedule. And it's not clear how, if a scheduling coordinator is submitting the schedules, or if the project is in PERP and the CAISO is actually doing the schedule submission and the forecast adjustment in real time, how would the resource know, who's trying to also balance this with storage, how would the storage operator know what the PERP forecast was in real time for the renewable resource? So anyway, I think that whole mechanism needs better explanation. And the last thing is, under what situation would the CAISO override the limitations, the grid charging limitations? There was some discussion of that, but it was very unclear, and so we would like a better understanding of that particular kind of situation, and a greater discussion of that. Do you want to go to the next slide? Okay, thanks. This eligibility thing, honestly, like I said, we were very concerned. We were very interested in what was in there for the straw proposal, and then very concerned for what looked like a clampdown in the revised straw proposal. And then the whole property tax thing I'm going to get to at the end. But the straw proposal basically said that as long as the resource could prove that they were using the ITC, that they would be eligible for this option, as long as they were depending on the ITC. Now, there was a discussion in that proposal of property taxes, but nothing in the eligibility addressed that. So if it turns out that there was no ITC eligibility after a certain time, but the property tax issue continued, there was no recognition of that. But it was a decent start, and we were encouraged to see it. And then the revised straw proposal seems to greatly narrow the eligibility and in a way that is not even clear. So it now talks about, instead of the ITC eligibility, which is a fairly straightforward thing and something that CAISO probably needs even to determine NQC for this kind of a resource, now we're talking about contractual ITC implications. So what it appears to mean from the discussion, although that's not really clear, is that if you have a PPA that prohibits grid charging, well, that sort of to us seems like backwards, because the grid charging prohibition comes from the ITC, and it's not the grid charging prohibiting that's the problem. It's the ITC structure that prohibits that, and so, or limits that greatly depending on what the trade-offs are. So it seems like you've gone to sort of the effect, but not the cause. And so even if a PPA does not have a prohibition against grid charging, it still doesn't mean that it's not really important for the viability and the economic viability of the project to limit grid charging. So limiting it just to where there's PPAs rather than a facility that's actually using the ITC, to us really just goes at a symptom of the problem and not the problem. That was one way people chose to manage the uncertainty early on when they were contracting these resources. But it's not the main problem. The main problem is you have an ITC limitation, and that this narrowing of the eligibility is very concerning. There's the issue of property tax implications. Again, what does that mean? The 5-year term doesn't as one of the earlier speakers said, doesn't address that. So the whole property tax thing is mentioned again, but once again not addressed. And the timing was in particular as an eligibility criterion very unclear. One place it says you have to participate on the grid, but then if you've been there more than 5 years, then it doesn't, when the option is implemented, then you don't get it. The other one says you have to have, seems to say, well, as long as you executed a PPA that prohibited grid charging before the option was implemented, maybe that gets you into this option. And another one said if there's some implications that were in place, this property tax or ITC implications were in place. It's very unclear. We don't like the restriction at all, but if you're going to have one, at least you should explain it. And then again, the 5-year limit does not address the property tax issue at all. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that's the issue with the particular thing. Now, this is another one of those things where we brought these issues up at the very first workshop. This is the third time at least that we have asked about for clarification here, and we have not received it. So, and one of the earlier speakers talked about, I think it was the CPA speaker, where some facilities, because the CAISO itself said we're only going to look at physical issues on, in terms of what goes in the master file. We're not going to look at your contract. So people designed facilities that would physically prevent them from charging from the grid. Well, is that okay? And if people can do that, well, then it would be nice if a CAISO would just say that that's okay. And does the CAISO even have the ability or the legal authority to tell people how they can design their facilities? Well, I think that's a real question too. But we would like, I know that's the second main bullet here, but we'd like to know whether it's okay to do that. And that's a pretty straightforward question, and we have not gotten an answer in any way to that question, other than we really hope you don't. Well, we know that, but that's not really the question. The self-help tools, the CAISO itself has implied that there would be schemes that would be in place to prevent charging from the grid, that it was okay for people to do this. And I'm not, but there, again, no straightforward statement of rescinding any of these documents that have been out there, or clarifying in any way whether these are okay or not. And then the last thing, and again, this is something we suggested 2 or 3 iterations ago in this initiative, is that you have the aggregate capability constraint. One of the earlier speakers talked about that you have an aggregate capability constraint. You could set the ACC to 0, and at the lower limit of the ACC to 0, we think, and that would prevent grid charging and allow that to happen. But is that okay? And again, we've asked this question. We don't have any kind of answer to that. And then the PMIN on the hybrid resource side, I know we're talking about co-located resources, but could you set the PMIN for a hybrid resource at 0, so you will never charge inadvertently from the grid for a hybrid resource? We don't know if that's okay, but that's something we would like to know, and it gives a straightforward answer too. You can go to the next slide. Okay. And then the last category of things that we have brought up several times and not gotten any clarification on. These are still resources. In fact, we asked this in the hybrid resources phase 1 initiative and didn't get any answers for that either. There are some issues around what could you recover lost ITC through market bids? Are there ways to do that? We offered to sit down with ISO and talk about this. We haven't pushed it either. So, we have to take our responsibility for that. But but issues around, why are people hesitant to do this, and why are they not bidding this way, and why are they resisting? Well, that's something the CAISO could probably take some more time to understand as far as the economics go. And then other market issues, there were statements about market bids, statements about default energy bids. I'm not going to go into the detail here, but basically unclear statements the CAISO has made which do affect revenue recovery and bids, and we would like some clear guidance from the CAISO on what it is they were talking about and how if there are tools to be had there, what tools they are and how they might help mitigate these situations. So that's the end of our proposal. So mainly co-located resource concerns with the current model, unresolved, ways that people possibly could help themselves and tools they could use if they were told it was okay or got some confirmation, and these other sort of basket of other things that we've been asking about for a while and would like some answers to as well.
Thank you, Susan. We do have questions that may be related to just co-located enhancements, but let me call on Chris Devon. Your line should be unmuted now if you have any questions.
Yeah, hi, this is Chris Devon with Customized Energy Solutions. So I just had some more general comments, but I think that I would also note here that LSA and Susan's points about some of these unresolved hybrid resources issues are also kind of going to the same type of input I wanted to make as well, where I think that back when I was working at CAISO and working on the Hybrid Resources Initiative, I think there was an idea about having some ability for these hybrid resources to, the hybrid resource model to help manage some of this. And I think, the CAISO's been delaying putting in the dynamic limit tool for hybrid resources. They have not done some of these additional work on hybrid resources that was kind of, I believe, was somewhat promised in the process, where some of these things were delayed, and then there was, a discussion of additional hybrid resource evolution, initiative that still has not been kicked off. And so I just think that there's been kind of a pattern of CAISO saying that there hasn't been time to discuss issues and delaying responding to stuff, and then unfortunately not getting back to that or not giving enough time during some of these meetings, where there just needs to be more time and more discussion on a lot of this stuff. For instance, on the hybrid resources, if the dynamic limit tool was in place and folks could limit their upper economic, Pmax or Pmin dynamically in the market to address these kind of grid charging issues, then I think a lot of other folks might be able to choose that model instead of using the co-located model, which raises a lot of these other ITC related grid charging problems, and then becomes more and more complex to deal with. So I just think CAISO needs to think about this holistically, and it would be a lot nicer to hear some kind of response about how these ideas are tied together. If the CAISO still thinks that hybrid resources and that model itself could be more of a solution for this, as opposed to just kind of talking about this co-located issue in more of a standalone sense. So I think I'll wrap up my input with that, but I definitely support, what Susan's presented here, needing some additional discussion, and hope that CAISO would open another hybrid resources initiative if they're not going to address some of those things through this process. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if I don't know if I've done, it's okay for me to respond, but I agree with what you said. I think the hybrid resources hybrid resources model sort of fell of its own weight in some cases, because the CAISO was really supporting the co-located model and maybe put more development into that, which is fine as long as we work through all of these other issues. I think also the idea in the last iteration we saw of the dynamic limit tool and how that might be used is that if a resource in some cases sort of ran out of resource, then they would end up having to file outage cards and it would be kind of this force outage. Basically, resource production limitations from the fuel would be treated as RAIM issues, and because they were not exempt from RAIM, even if it was just a tiny bit of storage, the whole resource lost its variable resource status. And so then that opened it up to RAIM and potentially treating, resource underproduction due to fuel shortages as forced outages. So anyway, so that, again, perhaps with more development that could have been addressed, but I don't think it ever really was.
Hi, this is Trang Vo at the ISO. So I wanted to thank Chris and Susan for the comments too, and also Chris especially for the context around the relation between the hybrid resources to be dynamic limit tool as well as to this initiative. So I just wanted to shed some light on the delays there. So as you may know, we had a lot of functionality to get into to implement prior to the summer, and that impacted the delivery of hybrid resources to be, which is now planned for the fall 2022 release, planned to activate on October 1st. So just wanted to give some context and information about where we were with that, and then just the cause of that delay, and also just thank you for giving more information about how this impacts, the initiatives or the policy that we're talking about today. And so that's definitely something that we'll consider, and in our progression of implementation of hybrid resources to, of course, prioritize delivering that as promised on fall 2022 release. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trang. We do have a few more questions. Sergio, I'm not sure if you still have a question, your hand's still raised. Sergio, your line's unmuted. Okay, so it sounds good. He doesn't have any questions. We could mute him. Derek, your line is unmuted. Do you have any questions for co-located enhancements?
Sorry, I think I forgot to put my hand down.
No problem. I appreciate it. So now we will give additional time for those who would like to raise their hand and ask any questions in regards to any of the three topics that we went over today's meeting. We do have approximately 25 minutes for this piece, and this is very, ad hoc at this moment. If you do have anything to add on, I know we did receive a few questions in chat, and want to make sure if you like to raise your hand and comment at this time. But in the meantime, while we wait, Gabe, would you like to provide any response to anyone at this time with anything that was addressed, just to start the conversation for all three topics?
No, again, I think I would just emphasize that I'm, very appreciative of the comments that we've received today, and I certainly am thankful that everyone could join, and that we have an opportunity to have this robust dialogue. I do really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gabe. And I do see Sergio back on our queue. Let's go ahead and unmute his line to see if he has any questions. Sergio, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I was double muted before. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just had a quick question, and I think it's a very, Susan put it quite well when she mentioned there was an important change in the co-located topic from the straw proposal to the revised straw proposal. And it seems that in that development, perhaps staff became more hesitant of their own idea, of their own electable functionality, and introduced a bit more of requirements for eligibility, etc. So I was wondering if there was more to that perhaps we can address too in our comments. Why in particular was like this 5-year eligibility limit added? I think from our perspective and our members, that's perhaps the most limiting of the requirements, especially because it's not necessarily the case that, today it might seem that way, but other tax considerations, including property tax considerations as well, might shift as time goes on. So I just wanted to know if there was some input that you guys might have on why you think there was this drastic change in eligibility considerations from the revised from the straw proposal to the revised straw proposal.
Yeah, Sergio, thanks for asking the question, and I think Susan hit on a lot of these topics as well, and some of the other, certainly the other written comments that we had hit on this, and then we've heard from a few other presenters today that have kind of flagged this as a key concern as well. So we certainly appreciate the challenges to developing storage resources in the current environment that we're in, and I think what the ISO certainly doesn't want to do is discourage new storage from coming on the system. But at the same time, we also want to incentivize storage resources to the extent that we can to participate up to their full technological capabilities. So, if a storage resource really is capable of charging or discharging, it's obviously better for our operations team if they have that capability at their disposal, and if our model has that capability at its disposal. So the idea with the sort of grandfathering or sunset date or whatever you want to call it of the co-located rules that we introduced with the revised straw proposal is that we would still observe contractual limitations that prevented grid charging, but at the same time, there would be a little bit of assurance on the side of the ISO to say, well, yeah, we're observing this for a certain set amount of time, and what we came up with was 5 years to match the investment tax credit current time horizon, and I agree, it doesn't match up with property tax incentives, which could potentially go on for a lot longer. But then at the end of that 5-year period, we would have the ability, or the ISO would have the assurances to know that storage resources would be fully participating in our markets. And from previous conversations, that was sort of what I understood the actual operations models and a lot of these contracts that have been set up say in their terms, which is, for a 5-year period, they'll be prevented from grid charging, but then after that time, the expectation would be, or there would be no expectation on grid charging. You could grid charge or you may not grid charge. And that's sort of where those, the new language, the new restrictions that came in the revised straw proposal came from. And frankly, obviously we had some good discussion about this when we had our stakeholder call for the revised straw proposal, but I was a little bit surprised at all of the feedback that we've gotten on this. And I think it's pretty clear that even though this might be a policy that the ISO would have envisioned being a compromise, it's not necessarily something that stakeholders agree with. And there is a big push not to have these kinds of restrictions in place.
Yeah, I appreciate that background, Gabe. I think there's significant worry about the language as it is included in the revised straw proposal. The use of having a demonstrable restriction or that it's included in contracts. I think you guys had it correctly in the straw proposal, focusing on ITC eligibility and resources that might still continue to come online since they are signing contracts as we speak today, might still be, looking forward to limit their grid charging in order to make the costs that they've estimated for their resources. Having this type of limitation on the number of years or that it's expressly included in the contract might be too exclusive. So yeah, I'd just like to echo what other presenters said and thank you for the opportunity and that clarity. Hopefully we can rethink this bit a bit more. Thanks.
Yep, thanks for those comments, Sergio. And again, thanks everybody for commenting on this. We really do appreciate the feedback and input.
Okay, so we do have Susan. We could go ahead and unmute her line for a quick, brief comment.
Yes, it will be very, very quick. Okay. I just wanted to say, I think, you know, the issue of economic efficiency is an important one, and we're glad to see that the CAISO isn't concerned about that. But for this and I'm not saying, you know, we agree with this policy of limitation of charging either, but that's the way the policy was written, and the people who were making that decision made that decision based on all the inputs they had, and that's what's there. So looking at looking at economic efficiency in a larger sense, what you've got is all this storage coming online that's been enabled by this ITC that is really going to help the CAISO in the short term and the long term operate the grid in a much better way, in a much cleaner way. And so the fact that there are a little bit of inefficiency here and there built in and some other features is regrettable, but it's the way that it's set up. But economic efficiency in the long term is going to be greatly enhanced by all of these resources, even with the restrictions that are built into the federal policy. And so we hope you will take a larger look at the whole concept of efficiency and understand and accommodate the way these things will have to operate under the federal rules.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No, that's all I had.
Steve, I think you're on mute, so just to confirm, you were going to say something. But we have Chris also. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just thanking Susan for those comments.
Wonderful. We have Chris. Go ahead, Chris. Your line's unmuted.
Yeah, hi, Chris Devin, Customized Energy Solutions again. One more point I just want to make, and I'll keep it brief. The fact that the PUC has qualifying capacity to get down the grid charging has been noted in a lot of the stakeholder comments prior discussions on this point in the Hybrid Resources Initiative. And I just think the CAISO should think about the fact that the impact to the overall rate counting qualifying capacity. Sorry.
Chris, I'm sorry, your line is a little bit choppy at this time. Can you fix the audio set so we can hear you clearly?
Yeah, sorry, is it a little better?
A little better. And go ahead, speak, and I'll let you know.
Okay, my point is to really think about, the fact that the PUC reduces the qualifying capacity of these resources that have ITC restrictions. So allowing them to avoid charging, seems to not really present a reliability issue with resources on the system that all have, qualified for RA purposes. So I did request that think about actually responding to that. But if you guys can't hear me, I'll just wrap it up and set in an kind of.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Go ahead.
It was happy, but I think the main gist of your message was that the CPUC is considering resources with ITC implications differently than resources without ITC implications, and I think that's a fair point. So thanks for bringing that up.
Great. So now we have Carrie Bentley. We could go ahead and unmute your line for.
Hi, this is Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum again. I just wanted to make sure that Chris's point was clear because we are one of the parties who've commented on this multiple times now, and that's that the CPUC actually already, under the existing rules, discounts the resource adequacy value, or QC, for resources under the ITC. So to us, it seems very inappropriate for the CAISO to order grid charging in any way for resources under the ITC when it's already being discounted. To us, that would be kind of double harm. And then on the point whether it's contractual or not, I'll note that times have changed, technologies have evolved, and software limitations and software design is very embedded in storage physical characteristics. And mandating storage charging would be like mandating a lower P-min for a gas plant or a faster ramp rate. And that's just not within the CAISO's purview. So we really would view it as discriminatory for the CAISO, absent RA rules around it, to order a specific characteristic for storage resources. So those are two of the main comments. I think the first one was the one Chris was trying to make, and then the other one was the one that still has not been addressed in the paper in response to our comments. Thanks.
Okay, so we are seeing no more new comments on queue at this time. We will move on to our next steps that I would like to share with all, that we do have information provided on this link where you can see all the presentations posted by our fellow stakeholders today, as well as this presentation. We have other documents there, so we will keep you posted on any other new information when it comes to our scheduling of meetings. At this time, we are at this point of our stakeholder process, and we appreciate all your feedback as we move forward in the proposal development. This is a timeline that we have sent to you coming up. We have a tentative scheduled date of the draft final proposal meeting on May 19th. So approximately a month from now, we will meet together, and then we have a tentative time frame of a July final proposal meeting for that. So we may include a workshop from between now to July for that, and then the September 2022 Board of Governors meeting. I do see Susanschneider's hand raised, so we can go ahead and unmute her line for a question.
Yeah, just a quick one. So you've got the dates here for the meetings. Does that mean we can expect the proposal documents of like 2 weeks before or 1 week before? What are your thoughts about that?
From the stakeholder affairs side, we do plan to post the document a week in advance of the meeting. We did actually post the revised straw proposal like a week and 3 days earlier. So we will work together with our team to make sure we post it at a reasonable time, but a week in advance is the best time we can provide.
Okay, that's great. And yeah, whatever we can give you better feedback in the meetings, the more you can give us, but I really do appreciate the advanced posting. Thank you.
Of course, and we will notice that as well. So if you follow us on our CAISO daily briefing, we do provide notices when we do post documents, and that will be noticed as well. And if that doesn't get received by from your organization, we do send an email out. So hopefully you've been receiving that email separately, just to remind you that the notice has been posted, as well as the any documentation. So yes, with that, yeah, of course. So no questions at this time. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our very last slide. We have the save the date for our 2022 Stakeholder Symposium on November 9th through 10th. We hope to see you all there. Please plan that we have this going on. We do plan to have our May registration opening up through our registration. That would hopefully be sent out as a notice as well. We do have additional information being posted at this time, but we're really excited for you to join us. We definitely will be our first in-person event since the past few years that we haven't held one. So please ask us any direct questions to our symposium registration at CAISO.com, and feel free to message us through ISO Stakeholder Affairs if there's any other questions that we may be able to address. But we are really excited to hopefully host you and your organization for our Stakeholder Symposium as well. I appreciate everyone's engagement for this initiative. We definitely appreciate all your comments and feedback, and we will look into keeping in communication with you all. But at this time, I don't see any remainder questions. We will go ahead and end this meeting a little early for all you to have your lunch. So I appreciate everyone's participation, and we look forward to seeing you soon. And I'll pass it back to my event producer to help me close this meeting. Michelle?
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.